An advisor for the Gambia's new president says former leader Yahya Jammeh stole more than $11 million from the country's state funds. Several eyewitnesses also said that luxury cars and other items were loaded onto a cargo plane on the night Jammeh left the country. He flew to Equatorial Guinea on Saturday, ending his 22 years in power. Let's speak to Samuel Kaninda. He's the Africa Regional Advisor for Transparency International. Good to have you with us. So what do you make of these allegations then, Samuel, that $11 million has gone missing along with Yahya Jammeh?
Thanks for having me. The first reaction is shock because the Gambia is a country that is still struggling with development. It's still ranked as one of the lower human development countries on the United Nations Human Development Index. So in such a context, to have the leader of a country that claimed that the interest of the people was his first priority to engage in such acts came with shock. But at the same time, because these are reports, we are hoping that an investigation will be done to either confirm or these allegations to a point where one could then decide whether it needs to be prosecuted.
In terms of fighting corruption, how difficult is it going to be for the Gambia, particularly now moving into a new political era after 22 years of rule under Yahya Jammeh?
Well, we welcome the fact that incoming President Adama Barrow has made it a point that firstly, he will be establishing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because you also need to proceed on the basis of information that will allow services to investigate and to bring those who are involved in illicit acts of corruption and other illicit acts to account. Because, as I said, the country has resources, but which have not been necessarily used for the betterment of the lives of citizens.
It's also not just a question of corruption, isn't it? I mean, Jammeh and his regime are accused of carrying out extrajudicial killings and torture while he was in power. Is there now a push for him to face prosecution since he's no longer immune?
Yeah, of course. We understand that the agreement that the Economic Community of West African States, the AU, which is the African Union, and the United Nations Security Council offered him immunity to the extent of legally owned assets and cases where that cover immunity. But at the same time, the incoming president has sent strong signals to say that he will not just give this a carte blanche, starting with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to look into all these allegations of claim down on the media, torture of opponents, and all these human rights abuses. That will then form the basis of any further action that will take place, because one should also take into account the fact that the country has been ruled in an authoritarian regime for over 20 years, where freedom of expression was not the order of the day. The voices of citizens were not really those dissenting voices, those who would ask the government to account for practices that they would not agree with the management of resources, were silenced in all sorts of violent ways. So these are still at the point of allegations that the regime has been denying. So we hope that the next few months will allow, with this new dispensation, justice to take its course.
Are you, as an advisor for Transparency International, are you optimistic about this transition for Gambia?
Well, one should admit that it remains fragile in the sense that we should give it a few more weeks to see what will be the first steps of the president once he gets into business. But the encouraging signs are that he has the support of the sub-regional bloc, ECOWAS, of the African Union, and the United Nations Security Council. But of course, ultimately, it will depend on him as the leader, his administration, but also the people. Now that the regime has changed, we should see whether people will be allowed to express themselves freely, to be part of decision-making processes, but also to be allowed to even demand accountability from the incoming president. So the next few weeks will be telling as to whether what President Barrow promised during the elections will come to be to materialize through the first decisions that will be made.
Yeah, we wait to see what happens. Samuel, thank you. Samuel Kaninda from Transparency International there.